Elimelech and his wife Naomi live in Bethlehem with their two sons, Mahlon and Chilion. In the year of a famine, Elimelech moves his family to Moabite country, where food is available to sustain them. And while they are there, their two sons marry Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. Now Elimelech dies before their marriages, and both boys finally marry and live for about 10 years, but then they die, and Naomi is left alone with Orpah and Ruth in Moab. So Naomi hears that there is food available back in the Promised Land, and she tells Orpah and Ruth to head on back to their people, the Moabites, so she can leave and go back to the Promised Land in Bethlehem. Orpah returns, but Ruth clings to Naomi, saying, "Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Where you die, I will die, and where you are buried, I will be buried." So both of them begin their journey to Bethlehem. Now when Naomi and Ruth enter Bethlehem, the whole city is stirred up because of this Moabite woman being there, and it frustrates Naomi. She had left Bethlehem with her whole family, and now she is returning with only a Moabite daughter-in-law. She tells Ruth to call her Mora because of all of her troubles. Naomi and Ruth had returned to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest, and all the poor people were allowed to go glean grain from the edges of the fields. Naomi tells Ruth to go glean from the field of Boaz because he's a relative of her husband Elimelech. So Boaz is a wealthy man with many servants and laborers in the fields. But one day Boaz comes to his field and he sees Ruth, and he asks, Who is this woman? Then he discovers that not only is she a widow, but she's the widow of one of his kinsmen. So he tells Ruth not to glean in anyone else's field. He even asks her to stay with his maids. He commands his servants not to touch her, and he allows her to drink from any pitcher that she wishes. Ruth falls at his feet because she has found favor with him. Now Ruth asks Boaz why he is being so kind to her, and he says it's because he has heard of all her good deeds for his kinsman's widow Naomi. Boaz invites her to eat with him, and he has his servants intentionally leave grain for her to glean. She works until evening and carries her load back to Naomi. "Where did you glean today?" Naomi asks, as she sees Ruth's bountiful harvest. "With Boaz," she replies. Naomi tells Ruth that Boaz is one of their closest relatives, and Ruth tells Naomi how Boaz wants her to stay close to the servants until the harvest is over. When the time comes to winnow the grain, Naomi devises a plan. She tells Ruth to help with the work, but when it is over, she is to clean up, put on perfume, and go to where Boaz is sleeping. She is to uncover his feet and lay down beside them, and he will tell her what to do. Ruth agrees, but when she uncovers his feet, he is startled and asks, "Who is it?" And she says, "It is I." And he tells her how excellent she is and how he would love to have her as a wife. But there's a kinsman closer to her husband than he is, so she is going to have to wait at his feet until morning. In the morning before dawn, Boaz awakes and gives Ruth 6 measures of barley to take to Naomi. He does not want her returning empty-handed, and back home she tells Naomi the story and waits to see how it is all going to unfold. And that day Boaz goes down to the gate of the city where business takes place, and he waits for Elimelech's closest relative. And when he comes, Boaz calls him over along with 10 witnesses. He tells the cousin that Naomi must sell a piece of land, and since he is the first in line, he needs to purchase it. The cousin agrees, but Boaz tells him that he must also take Ruth as a wife and raise a son in Mahlon's name. The cousin refuses because it will jeopardize his inheritance. So he tells Boaz to buy the land and take Ruth as a wife. Boaz agrees and has the 10 men as witnesses that he has purchased all that Naomi has, including Ruth. Boaz takes Ruth as a wife, and a year later she gives birth to Obed. Now Obed grows up to be the father of Jesse, and Jesse grows up to be the father of David, the future king of Israel. Now Elkanah is from the tribe of Ephraim, and he has 2 wives. One is Hannah, the other is Peninnah. Now Peninnah has children, but Hannah does not. And each year Elkanah goes to Shiloh to worship the Lord, and he gives all his family offerings to present. But to Hannah he gives a double portion. Peninnah constantly provokes Hannah to tears because she has no children. And one day in Shiloh, Hannah is so agitated that she makes a vow to the Lord. Now Eli has 2 sons that are priests at Shiloh when Hannah makes her vow. Eli sees her mouth moving while she is praying, but he cannot hear her words. He thinks she is drunk, and he chastises her. And she responds to him, and he understands that she is not drunk. Now Eli sends her on her way, blessing her and asking the Lord to grant her prayer. Hannah has promised the Lord that if he will give her a son, she will give him to the Lord's service as a Nazirite, and a razor will never touch his head. Returning to her home there in Ramah, Hannah conceives and gives birth to Samuel that very year. That year, as Elkanah prepares to go to Shiloh to worship, Hannah tells him she is not going to go. She has decided not to worship at Shiloh again until she has weaned Samuel. And after he is weaned, she will take him to the priest at Shiloh, and he will remain there the rest of his life in the service of the Lord. Samuel is finally weaned at the age of 4, and Hannah keeps her promise. She and Elkanah delivers him to Eli with an offering of a 3-year-old bull, 1 ephah of flour, and a jug of wine. She reminds Eli of her promise. She dedicates Samuel to the Lord, and she leaves him in the care of Eli. Hannah prays a beautiful prayer of thanksgiving to the Lord. She is so thankful for his holiness, his faithfulness, his justice, his righteousness, and his compassion and power. Now, even though Eli's sons are priests, they are worthless in God's eyes because they despise the Lord. And when they are overseeing the offering, they alter the required procedures so that they can steal the meat for their own use, even by force if the person giving the offering objects. Every day, the boy Samuel ministers before the Lord wearing a linen ephod. Each year, when Hannah comes to worship with Elkanah, she brings Samuel a new robe to wear. And one year, Eli prays for Hannah that she will have another son to replace Samuel, whom she has given to the Lord. The Lord blesses her with 3 sons and 2 daughters. Old Eli has heard of all the wicked sins of the boys, his boys. They are stealing from the Lord and committing adultery with women who come to worship. Eli is greatly disturbed because their job is to intercede with God for the sins of the people. But who will intercede for their sins? Samuel is a young man by this time and serving the Lord faithfully. Another man of God approaches Eli about the sins of his sons and announces that because of their sins, both of them will die on the same day, and a true priest will replace them, one whom the people will respect and bow before. Eli's house will no longer have an old man in it. In these days, it is rare to hear a word from the Lord. But on this day, as Samuel ministers to the Lord in front of Eli, Samuel hears the Lord calling him while he is resting in front of the ark of God. 3 times Samuel hears the voice of the Lord, and 3 times he thinks it's Eli calling him. Eli, old and almost blind, discerns that Samuel is hearing the voice of the Lord and tells him, "Return to the ark and to listen." The Lord comes and stands in front of Samuel and tells him that he is about to fulfill his promise to Eli to destroy his sons, and all of Israel will rejoice at the news. Samuel is afraid to tell Eli. He waits until morning and then opens the doors of the tent as usual. He calls to Samuel and asks him what the Lord has told him, and Samuel tells him everything, and Eli says, "It is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him." As Samuel continues to grow in stature, Israel recognizes him as a prophet of God. Every word Samuel speaks comes true. The Philistines have come against Israel and killed 4,000 Israelites. And shocked, Israel decides to get the ark of God and bring it to their camp at Ebenezer. But when they arrive with the ark of God, the camp explodes in joy. The sound frightens the Philistines because they fear God is in the camp of the Israelites. Who can deliver us from the God of the Hebrews, who sent plagues on Egypt, they say. However, the Philistines gain their courage, fight the Hebrews, and defeat them. They kill 30,000 soldiers and Eli's sons. A Benjamite runs to tell the people at Shiloh about the disaster. And a commotion stirs in the city at the news, and Eli asks the man for the report. And he tells old fat Eli that the battle is lost and his sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the Philistines have the ark. Eli, 98 years old, falls back off his stool, breaks his neck, and dies, ending his 40 years as Israel's priest. Now Phinehas' wife gives birth to a son after she hears the news of her husband's and her father-in-law's death and the capture of the ark. She names the boy Ichabod, meaning the glory of the Lord has departed. She dies in childbirth. The Philistines take the ark to Ashdod and place it before their god Dagon. The next morning Dagon had fallen before the ark, so they set it back up. The next morning it is down again, but its arms and head were cut off. The Lord is heavy on Ashdod, and because of this all the men break out with tumors. They send the ark to Ekron, where the same tumors break out on their men and boys, and Ekron's people literally go crazy with confusion. After keeping the ark for 7 months, the Philistines ask the priest how they can return the ark to the Hebrews. With an offering of 5 golden tumors and 5 golden mice, they say. So they prepare images of the tumors and the mice and put it in a box as a gift. They are to take 2 milk cows and lock up their calves so they cannot follow. They hook the cows to the cart and place the ark on it with their gifts in a box. If the ark goes straight back to the Hebrews, we will know it was their God afflicting us. If the cows stammer around, we will know our afflictions were just by random occurrence. The ark goes straight back to Israel. And when the people of Beth Shemesh are reaping the wheat fields, the ark passes by. Joshua, who owns the field, stops the ark and builds an altar on a rock, using the cart as wood to offer the 2 cows as a burnt offering to the Lord. The Levites come and take the ark and the gifts. The Lord kills 50,070 men at Beth Shemesh because they looked into the ark. And after the slaughter by the Lord, they send the ark away. The leaders call for the people of Kiriath-Jearim to take the ark. It is put in the house of Abinadab, where it will stay for 20 years with Eleazar as its caretaker. All the Hebrews are sad because the ark is in Kiriath-Jearim. Samuel speaks to them, instructing them to remove all the idols from their homes, return to the Lord, and he will deliver them from the Philistines. When they do, Samuel calls them to meet him at Mizpah. The Philistines hear that the Hebrews have gathered at Mizpah, and when the Hebrews hear that they are surrounded, they are afraid, but Samuel offers an offering to the Lord and calms the people. The Lord sends a great confusion on the Philistines, and Israel defeats them in battle. Samuel lays a stone there, naming it Ebenezer, meaning, "Thus for the Lord has helped us." The cities of Israel conquered by the Philistines are taken back, and the enemy does not enter the borders again during Samuel's entire life. Samuel returns to Ramah, where he lives, and builds an altar to the Lord. Every year, Samuel tours Israel from city to city. He is her judge, and she lives in peace under him. With the passing years, Samuel's age hampers him from judging the country. So he appoints Joel and Abijah, his 2 sons, as judges, but they are dishonest. The elders of Israel come to Samuel and ask for a king. Samuel is against the idea, but they press him for a king anyway. Now the Lord speaks to Samuel, telling him to not be concerned about their request. They are not rejecting Samuel, they are rejecting God as their king. Samuel warns the people of what a king will do to them, but they do not care. They want a king. They do not want to be ruled by judges any longer. They want a king. So the Lord tells Samuel to appoint them a king. Samuel sends all their elders home to their cities, and he begins to search for their king. Now the donkeys of Kish, the Benjamite, disappeared, and he sends his son Saul with a servant to find them. For 3 days they search, and Saul decides it's time to give up the quest because his father will be more worried about him than the donkeys. They hear that Samuel may be in town nearby, so they enter to find him. Women are drawing water for the evening, and they ask about Samuel, and he is just up the road going to bless the evening sacrifice, so Saul and his servant follow. The night before, the Lord has told Samuel that Saul will be coming, and he tells Samuel to set aside a special cut of meat for this meal with Saul. Samuel greets Saul and invites him to sit at the head of the table with 30 other guests. Saul is given this special cut of meat. And that evening, Samuel makes Saul a bed on the roof, and he tells them he will reveal everything to him in the morning. And at daybreak, Samuel calls Saul and tells him that he is to be the king that the people have asked for. Samuel anoints Saul with a flask of oil. Samuel then sends Saul on his way, telling him that he will meet 2 men near Rachel's tomb who will tell him that the donkeys have been found. And then he will meet 3 men with 3 loaves of bread, 3 goats, and a jug of wine, and they will give him 2 loaves of bread. When they get to the Philistine garrison, he will meet a group of prophets with tambourines and other musical instruments, and he will begin to prophesy to them. And it happens just as Samuel has told Saul. At home, Saul's uncle asks about the trip, and Saul tells him everything except the part about being anointed king. Samuel calls all the tribes together to present the king, but Saul is missing. He is hiding in the baggage. They get him, and when he stands up, he is head and shoulders taller than all the men in the assembly. Samuel presents him to the people, and they all say, "Long live the king." However, there are a few who do not believe that Saul can deliver them from the Philistines. The others have brought him presents, but the men who despise him have not. As their new king, Saul establishes his home in Gibeah. With Samuel's announcement that Saul is the new king, it does not take long before Saul has his first test. Not long after, Nahash the Amorite surrounds all the people of Jabesh-Gilead, and the people plead with him for a covenant, and he agrees, provided he can poke out the right eye of each man. Well, they ask for 7 days to think about the agreement and make their decision. So they send word throughout the land for help, and when Saul hears the plea, he is plowing in his field in Gibeah. He takes 2 of his oxen, divides them into 12 pieces, and sends the pieces throughout the land, calling all men to join with him in rescuing their neighbors. "If you do not come, you will be cut into pieces." So 300,000 men come from Israel, and 30,000 come from the tribe of Judah. The Jabesh-Gileads hear that their help is coming, so they tell the Amorites that they will make the agreement on the next day. And Saul arrives with his men and rescues the Jabesh-Gileads, killing and scattering the Amorites. The people have faith in Saul, and Samuel takes him to Gilgal, where there they name him as king over all of Israel, and all the people rejoice. Saul's inauguration occurs on the first day of harvest. He is 30 years old, and he will rule for 40 years, beginning in 1076 BC.